Hello and welcome everybody to Around the Battleground. My name is LHS and I'm your host. Today we have a very special show. It's our first show after Worlds, and
Woo!
we thought we'd make it really special. We've got the one and only Australian legend, Mr. HughZ here, and then
G'day.
we have JMac back from his his little gig he did down in Atlanta. You might have heard of it. You might have seen him representing NACE and then just doing some really phenomenal work on the analyst desk as well. Welcome back, JMac. I'm glad you're not too good for me at this point.
Feels good to be back. That was a very those 2 weeks, they felt like forever, but they also felt like they flew by. I mean, it's a lot of fun.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
Know the feeling.
And if anybody's been in that situation before, it's got to be HughZ, right? Like he knows exactly what you're feeling with that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a crazy time indeed. And I mean, I've only ever had to do like the 1 week of work, I guess, but usually I'd go there for like a week or 2 weeks beforehand to chat with all the high-risk people. So yeah, I know what you mean. It feels like, it's a unique experience to say the least.
All right, so we've got a lot to talk about today. So this show is going to be pretty big. We'll try to keep it as controlled as possible, but you know me, any show I'm a part of tends to get a little bit rambly. It's just that what's gonna happen. I know it. I try to keep things on track, but between myself, JMac, and now HughZ, we're all opinionated dudes, so we're gonna get on some tangents eventually.
I'm not opinionated. How dare you?
We're going to be breaking down Worlds, so there's a lot to go in there. I did a show the night after, so the night of the first round. So I talked about a few things there, made some predictions, which came true. I think all of my predictions after the first day came true. So I think that was really telling about the first day of DreamHack, what you could see. And then we're going to break down a bunch of stuff with HughZ here. Season 6 has been really polarizing so far. It's kind of waned a little bit now. There's a lot more understanding, but I wanted to talk to somebody who could see both sides of it. HughZ has been on both sides of the company, really. He's been one of the best supporters, but he's also kind of, right now, he's really feeling that role of like community watchdog. He's really calling high-res out in a lot of ways when they kind of screw over certain things, so I wanted to get HughZ on over the next couple weeks. Information is going to be slight coming in as far as roster goes, so I'm going to be talking to a lot of players, see what their thoughts are on season 6, because it's going to change from person to person and between regions and everything like that. So that's going to be the focus for the next couple weeks, while we are left basically in the lurch with all of the roster news and everything like that. We're not going to be hearing a lot for a little bit. So like I said, tonight we're going to be focusing on DreamHack. We're going to be talking about season 6, and the big part of that, we'll talk about everything else, but the big part is going to be all the changes with moving to Atlanta and all of that. So I guess we'll start with that because that is the biggest talking point. I want to talk about Worlds, but I feel like we can't properly talk about Worlds until we really break down the season 6 stuff. And I'll let HughZ kind of walk us through the changes. And then I'll ask him some questions on what he thinks about it. But HughZ, for those of us who don't know, and I don't know how we couldn't, walk us through the announced changes for season 6.
So if my memory serves me correctly, the changes are every single game is going to be played on LAN, and they're all going to be best of 5 sets, which I think isn't being talked about enough. Best of 5s is pretty crazy.
Oh, wow.
And it's going to be, there's no regions anymore. It's 10 teams, and you can be from literally anywhere in the world, which opens up a lot of opportunities for players and for mixed teams and things like that. No changes to the minimum salary as far as we've been told, but there will be a housing stipend if you do move to Alpharetta. And I think they said it's going to be 40,000 a year for a team that lives within a 20-mile radius of the studio, something like that. And if not, then if you want to still live wherever you live, they will pay for your travel and accommodation when you come into Alpharetta. And there's only, I think, 12 trips total in the year, and no one will fly more than 3 times in a single month. So they're very, very committed, obviously, to bringing everyone to LAN and play all on LAN. There's no more splits. The results are throughout the whole year, which is, I think, something that people have been asking for certainly a lot more in Season 5, but I think it's been kind of a concern for a while. There will be a mid-season invitational, they've said, which would obviously be based on the results at that point in the split, and then there'll be Worlds again at the end of the year, just like there was this year. And SGS is gone. SML is still there, and I don't know if SML had teams increased or if it's staying the same, but they do now have a base minimum salary of 10,000 a year, which is really cool for a minor league thing, and I think that's a really cool. I really love seeing that level just below pro getting that support, because that's where you can really build the foundation of a game really strongly, and no reach restrictions on SML either. And I think that just about covers it. Oh no, and SML spots will be franchised as well.
All right. For the SML, it is down. It's a total of 8 teams, so it goes from 12 to 8.
Yeah, there you go.
So 6 for each region and everything. So that's a little bit. But I do. Let's focus. It's hard to see where we want to focus, right? Let's focus on your backyard. Let's focus on the SGS stuff. Throughout the year, you and I have kind of been talking behind the scenes a lot, especially about you know OCE, about Smite Global Series and everything like that, and things that we would like to have seen. And obviously, it was kind of a blow to see SGS kind of go, especially for you as an OCE guy. What when you read that announcement, like what were your thoughts on that? Was this kind of like you expected this at this point, or were you kind of truly shocked that they're really going to do away with the international scenes?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't surprise. It was disappointment. Because I read the announcement and I saw, because they didn't actually announce that SGS wasn't going to be partner anymore. They just didn't. They had in their announcement, they didn't have anything about an upcoming SGS announcement. So I went to Orbit. I think I was actually the first one to pick this up because I didn't see any posts before I talked about it. And I went to Orvi and I said, does this mean SGS is not going to be here next year? And she said, yeah, at this stage, international is not being supported next year. And I was like, disappointed but not surprised, especially after, talking to various hirers and I guess now Skillshot people about Oceania and the SGS and the international scenes in general. The main point they were always putting to me is, things would be better for OCE if OCE won a game. And, we won a game. It might have been against Benny Q, Blink Chiron that he never used, but we still won a game. We still put the results out there. And I had a massive tweet thread yesterday about the legacy of Smite OCE and the things that we've achieved. And I don't know, you can't really argue against that. OCE has shaped Smite in a lot of different ways, be it, coaches, be it casters, be it community members and the interactions with the pros, our players. The Direwolves have had a lasting legacy on the Smite scene. The Richard Castle drinking game, for Christ's sakes, was a thing. And I don't know if it was still a thing at this Worlds, but I know it certainly was at the last Worlds.
Not that I know
the and the OCE players, their interactions with the other SPL pros and how well they got along. The only other example we saw of that internationally was Cliz, and Cliz did that very well. But the OCE players all did it as well. And the washing machine meme is still there. As much as I hate it, it's still a meme in the Smite community. So you can't really argue that international Smite hasn't contributed anything to the Smite scene, especially the Smite pro scene. So I was very disappointed to see that they didn't value those contributions enough to continue SGS. And then I think after a lot of the tweets coming out about the negativity around Season 6 and international Smite being done away with, that's when we got that second announcement of, we'll look into doing international, but we don't have any details yet. So I think what they kind of thought was, all right, we didn't think there'd be this much backlash. We should do some form of international. We'll see what we can throw together. So my suspicions will be it'll be similar to the SGS. Hopefully what it will be more independence by the international scenes to run themselves. And I honestly think that not being broadcasted by the Skillshot crew is probably a really good thing, because it allows international talent to cast the games. It allows them to broadcast the games at their own times. Like the game, when the OCE games were casted on Hi-Res TV by the local OCE talent and OCE production, we were getting 2.5K viewers, which is not shabby for an Oceanic esport. And there was a community that came out and supported at all the events. the community showed up and cheered really loudly, impressed the higher staff with their commitment stuff. So the scene is there. The scene is, I mean, after all the damage of SGS in this last couple of announcements, who knows? But in the past, the scene has been there and ready to support Smite. We love Smite here. There's no two ways about it. We've always been passionate about Smite, and I think being allowed to do it on our own terms again would be something that would be really cool and beneficial. Yeah, I don't know. I think that was one of the main harmful things to international Smite, was having it broadcasted out of the Skillshot studios, because you really took the local audience out of it. Because as much as we love Smite, getting up at 3 a.m. to watch the games isn't feasible for everyone.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, that's my first taste of international Smite. Was watching LATAM broadcasters, right? Like that was,
yeah.
I went to go watch Cliz and Black Dragons, going to that.
Yeah.
I forget the two guys who did it, but I will never forget their faces, watching them.
Firebug, I think, is one of them.
Yeah. God, that feels so long ago, right? Like,
yeah.
Those guys. But I was like not knowing the language or anything, but still like being hyped and like getting a hype with them and seeing the crowd interactions like in chat and everything. And JMac, you and I have talked about this a little bit, leading up into Worlds, how the legacy, like what HughZ was saying, was the legacy of OCE, right? I mean, you look at all of the teams that come in to these lands the last 3 years in a row, between Direwolves, between Scylla last year, between Atletico. Like it's sad to see that like this international scenes. Like give me your thoughts on like after you heard that announcement.
I mean, with all of the SGS stuff going on to here, I mean, I got to work personally with a little bit of SGS myself when I did the SEA region for a little bit. As little as I actually was able to get involved, I still managed to tune into the broadcast for it. And that was when, God, I mean, that was the EU team who was putting that one on. So for me, they started that at like 7 in the morning for me. So it was not the most convenient time for me, obviously, but for them, that's like their noon, 1 o'clock and whatnot. And, that itself, I mean, the SEA and really every region has kind of brought their own legacy into Smite. SEA is known for doing the kind of weird stuff alongside China. We're just going to kind of, they are the reason that Anubis is troll picked, like troll hovered. Every single World, it doesn't matter. Every event you go to, there's always going to be a troll Anubis hover, and you can thank China for that one, because they would hover it, but then they would actually pick it, and so that's why everybody gets so hyped for it. SEA was the same thing with Loki, Hobwall, all kinds of crazy things. OCE always had their legacy going with them, and so for me, losing the direct SGS from Skillshot and Hi-Rez, it is kind of a harmful thing for me as well, because while I can see maybe what one of their reasons was being, well, the SGS hasn't produced really much of anything in the last 4 or 5 seasons. There hasn't really been anything aside from a game here and a game there taken off of some of the big league teams here. And I think this last LAN was evident as to kind of still where some of those regions stand comparatively to the North American and EU scene. It still does kind of suck just seeing them basically for the meantime dropping it entirely. But I think that if they do end up bringing in, allowing other organizations to pick the scene back up and kind of do their own broadcasts, like HughZ, and I remember the first time I watched OCE was HughZ and Alpha. I mean, they were sitting there casting the OCE scene together, and that's the meta that I watched whenever I wanted to learn about OCE going into Worlds. I sat there, I watched it, and I literally wrote down on every page of my notebook, Bologna Freya, Bologna Freya, Bologna Freya. And that was all that was ever picked for so long. But that's the legacy that got built up with that one. We've done broadcast overs of some of the other ones, like the LATAM and the Brazil ones. We casted over the finals. They still had their international scenes for that. And them losing that kind of sucked, because that was their talent that is now gone. And while the Skillshot guys are great and everything, it's the same 6 faces that don't have all of the information that some of these other casters have. Like HughZ, he knows pretty much anything and everything about OCE, where Hi-Rez and the Skillshot guys really only know what's directly in front of them at that time and what they can maybe catch in their spare time. So I think that if they do bring this SGS back, I think settling it back out of home for them is probably going to be their best option to get the best recognition for those teams, because there was a lot of sets that did get missed by them only casting 1 or 2 sets a week from each of these scenes.
Yeah,
And even
I
then, even
really
only casting 1 or 2 sets a week, a lot of them were lost due to technical difficulties or Hyros having to broadcast other
Right.
things. So we lost a lot of that Smite. And yeah, I don't know. I'm glad to hear you say that you agree with bringing it back to each individual scene as well, because you know, as long as as long as Hyros and Skillshot have that incentive at the end of the rainbow of an international opportunity to compete, I don't think it matters really what other support they throw at these
Hmm.
international scenes. People are going to want to compete for the opportunity, and that's really not that much out of Hi-Rez's or Skillshot's pocket in the long run to take these teams international. It is. I know how much it costs to travel from Australia to America and back. Believe me, I know. But in the overall scheme of things, with their mixer deals, with their sponsorships, everything like that, it's not that much change in their pocket to keep another 4 international scenes interested, to add that extra bit of mystery to Smite and Smite competitive events and everything like that. Like, who would have thought coming into this event that, Australia would take a game? Literally every odd that could be stacked against you was stacked against you. The players you're competing against compete against the best of the world regularly. They get salaried to play the game. You get next to no money out of SGS. You get 1 set broadcasted a week. They get all of their games broadcast. Everything like that. Anything that you could possibly imagine to be against a competitive team was against these guys, and they still managed to pick a game. And you could say troll as much as you want, but trolling only loses a game so much. People still have to have the skill enough to close out the
Hmm.
game, and they nearly won the set. That second game was a close game. It's like, I don't know. It's the talent is there. We've seen LATAM take a game. We've seen Brazil take a game. Brazil nearly won a best of 3 set against Eager in season 4. Like, the talent is there for these international scenes, and you know, it would be great if Skillshot and Hi-Rez were able to be really involved and foster it a lot. But I think if you're not going to make that full commitment, don't kind of half-ass it, which is kind of what the SGS felt like this year. Like, either take your hands off completely and let the scenes sort themselves out, because before that they were doing a pretty damn good job. But if you're going to kind of stick your fingers in the pie and say we're going to do it our way, but we're not going to really do anything, then it's like you really just do more harm than good.
Hmm.
I agree. I would love to see it if they were to bring it back. Make like a Smite International. Like, you can make those channels, right? Whether if you got this mixer
Yeah.
deal, do it mixer, make everybody like stream the games on mixer. If that works, you bring back like the tier monster days, right? Like all of those casters, right? Like you've got that stable of
Yeah.
people who really want to do it, and you've got people who want to do it, locally, and you just broadcast that way, because I really like that idea, because I mean that's how I took in Smite for a long time. It's like
Yeah.
I went and watched the the challengers, the combine, whatever, like before Smite started. I would always go watch that. I always enjoyed, kind of watching some of those things, even if it was just like to go meme on Freight Train because he pronounced stuff wrong. Like I would, it was always just fun to kind of go watch that stuff. And the fact that that's kind of like gone. And I understand like part of it as far as broadcast goes. I get the dip in quality, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff you can do to mitigate that, right? I mean, look at this show right here. This is a produced broadcast show where we have a guy in Illinois, I believe, right now, or say, I think he's Illinois, but he's on the mixer board behind us, like taking care of all this. Like I'm not producing any of this right now. It wouldn't be that hard to have an in-house guy. You have a production team, have him work very closely with each talent or whatever, teach them how to use some software, like set up, make a Jithens clone for every region, or just tell Jithens to do it. I'm sure he would.
Poor guy.
And so there's all those little options. Because I feel like that this last year of the SGS was half-assed. I do feel like they were like, we want to bring it in. It's going to be more produced. It's going to be better quality. But then all of these things happened, and it's that meme of the Eric Andre show where like he shoots the thing and be like, what happened?
Yeah.
Like you did it to yourself at this point. It's like, well, SGS didn't produce nothing. It was like, well, you didn't produce SGS. Like, what do you expect was going to happen? And
I just want to say, while I have, because Cyanide's here in the chat, and he used to do a lot of the OCE production stuff, and yeah, I have to shout out because he worked so long and hard on Smite for very little money, and his production quality was better than the SGS production quality this year. So to say that the Hi-Res line that we're going to produce the SGS and it's going to be better quality broadcast. It was not a better quality broadcast this year. I'm sorry. The only thing that was different was the casters. The pix and ban screen, our one looked better. Maybe I'm biased, but the pix and ban screen is kind of average. And then you had a few kitschy transitions during the broadcast and stuff like that. We had all of that stuff and more when we're doing it here in OCE. So maybe the other regions were different. As you said, Southeast Asia was produced by the EU guys. I don't know. I personally think the production was fine as it was compared to what the Hi-Res production was this year for SGS. I can't see how you could say that the local production was
the
worse.
thing was too, like, because you point out OCE and LATAM and everything, right? They had easily the highest level of players, production, everything, right? But then you're adding in all the other places, right? And that quality came up, but when you're starting with really none, that's an easy thing to do. So that came up, but everything else kind of came down, and it was rough. Like, that was something that, like, I think everybody kind of pointed out with, like, is that, like, LATAM, Brazil, and OC really kind of got the shaft in the SGS deal. Like, they were going backwards instead of forwards, and I think that's the biggest problem.
Yep.
If you have 3 out of the 4 scenes all taking a step backwards with your step forward, like, that's just not a good look. And all right, so I want to kind of move on. Like, we are like harping on the season 6 stuff, the SGS, and it's a shame. And I want to kind of end on that. Is like, I kind of get the idea of what they were going for. Is like they look at SGS, and every year we can say, hey, there's talent here. There's obvious talent here, but it's not put together. Like, it's still really rough. They're all like, they haven't been honed enough to really make a real shot at everything. And so now that there's no region locks in Smite at all, theoretically, ideally, you have those international players. You have, Smite Arrow get picked up by a team to be jungle, right? You have Regan get picked up to be a mid somewhere, right? You have all these people, Texie, like, you have all these really phenomenal international players get picked up. But, I'll say my piece and then I'll ask both of you. In a world where all of Optimus Gang can't get an SPL spot because they speak English with a broken accent, with like a Russian accent, they speak broken English, when they can't find an SPL roster, there's no way that I see a LATAM, a Brazilian, a Southeast Asian. I don't see any of those people ever getting a spot just because of the language. If those guys, if Johnny can't get an SPL spot, nobody else is. And that's just plain and simple. HughZ, what do you think? Like, do you think we will see any international players get a chance in the SML at least this year?
I would highly doubt it. And I think even, we've shown that we can produce great coaches. Biggie and Rowe both won titles with their teams, right? Can't question OC's coaching ability. Playing ability is another story. And I actually wrote a little bit about this in my notes that I told you about earlier, where, the idea of removing region lock and then allowing international players to come in and, removing SGS so that international players can come play SPL and SML, that's counterintuitive to what they're doing by reducing the number of teams. They said we want to reduce the number of teams because still at the bottom level, there wasn't that quality to be competitive, right? But if you're going to bring in these international players, potentially, they should make up for that bottom talent at the bottom level of the SPL or the SML, right? But by reducing the number of teams, you make it just that even more hard for an SML player, let alone an SGS player, to try and get a spot on one of these teams. So it's like, what do you want? Do you want international players to be more involved, or do you want to reduce the number of teams? Because you can't really have both. Because, as I said, you just make it that much harder to get on a team. Even as an SPL player, it's now that much harder to get on one of these 10 teams. Even with all the players that are retiring or not coming back or whatever you want to call it, there's still a lot of talent at the upper level of the Smite Pro League. As we saw from the placement land had some extraordinarily close games and sets. And the fact that they're reducing teams really runs counterintuitive to their line about trying to integrate international players more into it. So I would be very, very surprised if an international player got a spot on an SPL or an SML team. I think that they have the talent to compete at that level, but as Cherio pointed out on one of my tweets yesterday, it's super risky when you have known quantities elsewhere and you have a limited number of spots. Why take the risk on an international player, especially as a player? As a coach, maybe a bit of a different story, but as a player, it's so risky.
And I think adding on to that is just the whole numerical factor of it. They're reducing not only the SML numbers by 4 teams, they're also reducing the SPL by 2 teams. So now we're dropping 30 potential players out of the running entirely, who are now having to fight even harder for those spots that were already so difficult to get at that point. I would be surprised if we saw more than one, if even one international player even make it onto an SML team at this point. Even with the powerhouses from OCE and HughZ over in Brazil's side, I'd be surprised if we even saw one person make it in. I'd highly doubt that we'd see even more than one of them, because while they are at that caliber, you have to remember that if they're not on the SPL team, so if they're not moving to Alpha Red and they're playing SML, they are playing online still. Though the SML is not a LAN base, so they're going to have to play with the 300 or whatever ping that comes out of Brazil or whatever region in order to play that. And that's why I think that even the intermingling on the lower end is going to be a little kind of counterproductive onto that one, because you want this lower end to be more competitive, but now you're adding, lag and ping factors in there. Some players are going to have 150 or 200 ping, where another team who's playing all NA is probably only going to have maybe, 80 ping or something like that. So there's going to be those factors to bring in too. And I think that's why it's going to make it so much riskier to bring them. I don't think any of the SML is going to pick up an international just because of that reason alone, because it is online. I think there's more of a chance that we would see an SPL team pick up at least one of those international players before we saw them in the SML, just because of the fact you bring them into the LAN environment, so you don't have to worry about that, and now you can work directly hand in hand with them.
I could see that. I would love one of the franchises that gets a spot in the SML to just go full chaos mode and pick up Black Dragons. Like, I want Black Dragons to be one of the invited SML orgs, right? Just for the chaos. So like everybody like it's like playing a London game in the NFL, right? You have it circles like, oh man, we got to play Black Dragons next week. Oh, the ping is going to be the worst. And that going in, right? I would love to see the chaos of that. That'd be really funny. But if anybody deserved it too, right? Black Dragons has been in Smite for forever now. It just kind of feels bad. We going into this year with season 5, we had a bunch of orgs who didn't make the cut. Elevate, who's been around in Smite for forever too, not making the cut. Initially Rival not making the cut. All of this kind of stuff where it was just it feels bad, right? Like, I understand. Yeah, Team Mythic. Geez, I understand the business decisions inside of that things, but it was it was still awkward to me. Like, Trifecta made it in. Trifecta is an SPL org, but these other ones aren't. All right, that's weird. But that's neither here nor there. Like, we still got plenty of speculation on who the other team's gonna get dropped from. Obviously, you can kind of tell from my my little story there who I think should be dropped out of the SPL. But let's kind of move forward. All right, so we talked about SGS kind of moving out. We talked about international players having trouble making it back in. We can look at, I don't know, HughZ, we'll let you pick. What do you want to talk about next?
All right, so I have kind of a list of stuff now. My overall feelings on season 6 is, as you said, I can kind of see the good and the bad. So I'm very middle ground on this. I don't think it's the best decision in the world, but also don't think it's the end of Smite. I don't think it's the worst decision in the world. Especially over the last couple of days, being able to digest the information a bit more, seeing the kind of shift in attitude from Hira/Skillshot staff of being, their initial reaction to players not liking the change was, you guys are idiots. You just can't see the clear picture. You don't understand what's going on, and that hostility just fed the anger and the mistrust even more. But with the kind of shift in attitude to being more helpful, the explanation video by Todd Harris, the housing stipend, all the things like that, that's certainly helped calm some of my fears about season 6. And what I kind of want to do is talk about the bad of season 6 first, and then finish on the good, because you always talk about the good first and finish on the bad, and everyone leaves only thinking about the bad. So I want to talk about the bad first, because it's the stuff we've all been over so many times, and everyone knows about the bad stuff. And then we'll talk about the good, so people can kind of see more of the good. And obviously the main bad point is, people from EU and even people from within NA that live in different places like Canada or live on the west coast and stuff like that. Everyone has to pick up and move to Alpharetta. And Alpharetta is a nice little town. And I've obviously, looked into living there myself, and it's all right. It's not something that you go, oh boy, yippee, I can't wait to move to Alpharetta. And even moving to America, I mean, you guys would know better than I would, but as someone from the outside that's looked in, health insurance and all the things that you typically hear about in the news about being so difficult about living in the US is something that now all these players have to take into account, and it is scary. And one major point I want to bring up, and I think it's something that people haven't discussed enough, is that some of these players that Skillshot and Hires are asking to move over are very, very young. Like Emil's only 18. A lot of these players are under 18. A few of them are only in their early 20s. And, I've seen a lot of people say, well, I've had to move countries, I've had to move cities for work before. It's just part of being an adult. But typically, a lot of those people have had a chance to finish their education, have had a chance to go off to college and do all those kind of things. They've had a chance to live a little bit of life before going and working. And I know that's not the case for everyone. I know a lot of people have gone straight into work and then have had to, move and do lots of various things. And I understand, but I think a little bit more sympathy and a little bit more help towards the players, especially the younger ones, needs to be put out there. And I think there was some great threads today between Emilzy and FDOT and a bunch of other people, explaining how to, live and work in Alpharetta. And I think that is a really, really positive sign. But you can't avoid the negative fact that moving to the US and living within the US healthcare system is a negative, especially when you come from a great system in the EU.
Yeah, JMac, you got anything to add?
No, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. Is while they're getting the housing fund and while they're still getting all of their salary and whatnot, there are still those negatives. And I mean, America itself is the butt of so many media jokes right now. It's ridiculous what kind of insanity is going on into our country, where every day you wake up and you see a tweet that says real Donald Trump, and you're like, is that the actual real Donald Trump or is that the fake real Donald Trump going on here? And it's a constant guessing game of what is going on in our country. And that's a massive uncertainty for a lot of you people who are secure in themselves. And they're sitting there laughing at us like, hey, you guys voted this idiot in. But then now they're looking at like, now we might have to move into the country with this idiot. And now we have to deal with what's been going on to here. And for a lot of these younger players, like you said, Emil's is only 18. And I know even for a lot of the SML players are, high school age. Even some are still in high school or just getting into college and whatnot. I know Sam for Soccer is a college player himself. I believe Paul is a college student. Shaco is a college student. There's so many young factors here, while there are a lot of veteran players for Smite who have been in the scene, these 3, 4, 5 years or more. For some of them, a lot of these players are starting to kind of take over. We're starting to see the birth of this younger audience, and by bringing a lot of that younger audience into unfamiliar and uncertain territory, it kind of brings up this hostility factor.
Yeah, I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, like against the players, because there's one thing that I saw on repeat mentioned, and it was the idea that you'd come here and then you'd have to get a car. So you'd have to buy a car, rent a car, or lease a car, whatever, right? Then you have to get a license, have to register and all that in order to get around, because your only other option is like Uber. Atlanta is one of the better for this, like the metro, like everything like that. The public transport in Atlanta is not the worst in the United States. It's actually pretty good. Now, that being said, American public transportation is a giant global joke. I get that. But the idea that you couldn't take a bus somewhere, right? You couldn't walk anywhere. I think a lot of the idea that they couldn't walk somewhere because you'd have to walk along the side of a highway is painted very much by their experience walking from the Staybridge the hotel over to the studio, right? That is something that they haven't experienced anything else, right? So that's what they think everything is going to be like. And it's not that way. Pros, let me tell you, you can catch a bus. That is something you can do. You can walk down to a bus stop and catch a bus to go downtown. You can catch a bus to go to the grocery store. Those are all things you can do. And if you go as a group, you're probably like nothing's going to happen to you. Like that's just something that I saw over and over again between since this started, is like the idea, oh, we got to get a car. You don't. Public transportation does exist here. and it's not terrible, especially in Atlanta. And Alpharetta, there's like you can walk. What's importantly, there's shopping plazas. Is that all right? So HughZ, I have not traveled outside of the United States, but I would assume shopping plazas are a thing everywhere, right? You go in and there's just like
You mean like
15 stores in a little area.
so like a
Like,
mall or a shopping center is what you mean?
Kind of like a mall, but
Yeah.
but not like inside. So it's just like a strip mall? Is that what you would call that?
I think an
Oh,
outlet mall.
okay. No, I get what you mean. So they're like, yeah, I kind of get what you mean. Yeah, yeah. We
Yeah,
don't call them
like that-
plazas, but yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah, like that's a big thing in the United States, especially in Atlanta. There's like
yeah.
we're gonna go to Town Center Plaza, and there's everything you could need. You can take a bus there, you
Yeah.
get back. Like that's just you got to do.
Yeah, no,
I
I get what
want
you
to
mean.
stop
We
seeing the
don't
public
have that.
transportation stuff. God.
That's that's not as big of a thing in Australia. We more have our malls and shopping center kind of thing. But yeah, I know what you mean. And one thing as well, just continuing on your point and agreeing with you, is I think a lot of the players forget that they're or think have in their mind that they're going to be there alone and isolated away from family. But you're going to have other Smite players around you, presumably. You're going to have probably at least 30 to 40 other Smite pros there. You're going to have the high-risk people. There'll be people around to help. But I mean, I still see their concerns. I don't want to go too much into the positives just yet because I still want to focus on this negative train, and then we could get to the positive and go all positive together. But you bring up a very valid point. It's there are other ways to get around. It's more difficult than say perhaps Europe, where Emilzy was saying he could get around on a bicycle, but it is it's possible.
You can get around on a bicycle. But Americans hate bicycles. That is definitely a thing. You could do it.
Yeah.
Everyone's just gonna hate you.
Yeah.
It's
kind of similar to Australia. We tolerate them, but we don't like them.
So focusing on the negatives there, I do hear it. Like the idea of, I feel like you specifically have hit the nail on the head with how negative the reaction from HughZ is first. Like thinking back, like Tom's F.Dot's tweet about not understanding why people were upset or negative, right? Like I feel like that right off of the bat put everybody on the wrong foot. It was just such an uncaring move, right? And it just rubbed, I feel like, a lot of people the wrong way, and immediately made them defensive, immediately made them assume the worst. It's Worlds is where we all realize, we all kind of like each other. We all kind of love each other. The community is all really nicely ingrained with one another. It's usually where goodwill and everything is at the highest for HughZ. Like, because everything comes out, it's like, well, I guess Uncle HughZ isn't that bad. We're all pretty good friends here. Like that, like your goodwill sentiment is at its highest. But like that immediately saw all the goodwill we usually see at Worlds kind of dissipated, and immediately all of the feel good tweets kind of turned into like this toxic and like everybody kind of being mad. It was such a big thing to see, and having seen the turnaround within the last couple of days, actually being able to open up and talk to people, I feel like that has opened up a lot. But it's still like even the video that Todd made wasn't quite like it still felt like it was not quite there. It was like looking out like, listen, kids, right? The whole tone of everything was like just really off.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to bring up with that, and I think the line that they used, I think, was a hard pill for people to swallow at first, but it's a little bit easier now. But the line was something like, "We're really committing to Season 6, and we're asking our players to commit alongside us." And that, I think, rubbed people the wrong way the most, because it made it sound like that, hey, if you're not willing to travel or not willing to live in Alpharetta, you're not committed to Smite, or you're not committed enough. And it's like, how can you say that to some of these pros that have committed the last 6, 7, 8 years of their life to playing professional Smite, to putting off things, to, putting off education, to putting off traveling, putting off work, putting off all these things to play Smite, and saying you're not committed enough? I think that rubbed people the wrong way. Even though, yes, you would have to commit to Smite fully 100% to move over, the way it was phrased was, I think, made a lot of people feel like that HughZ was calling them out. They're like, oh, if you don't move, you're inadequate, you're not committing enough. And it's like, I don't know. I would have tried to say it differently, even though I understand their sentiment. I understand what they were trying to convey. It's just, I think it was Pretty Prime's wife saying
Yeah,
something
I,
like,
I
telling
was
my
just
husband that
about to
he's not
say that.
committed
Yeah.
enough. Yeah. Yeah, telling my husband that he's not committed enough when straight away after the birth of our daughter, he went over and played on LAN. You know, how can he say that to someone like that? And so I think that was one of the most, yeah, I don't know. I think that really rubbed people the wrong way. And I just want to kind of continue on this thread and continue on what you said about a lot of those tweets, you know, straight away during World. I saw a couple of tweets from various people about like, you know, this is what you have to do to make it in the entertainment business, because that's what this all is after all, is the entertainment business. And yes, you do, but you have to think in a lot of those other entertainment businesses, even in other esports, right? There is at some point potentially supposed to be this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There's supposed to be this massive upside if you do make it, in quotation marks, when you make it in the business, right? You know, with musicians, you know, you get, you know, a lot of money and fame for being a successful musician. You have that great selling album or whatever. You have great live shows and concerts. You know, film stars. You have that great movie. You have that great role. You get all those awards and nominations. You know, other esports, like, this is kind of my main point here, is like, what is the upside to fully committing to Smite as a player? Now, make the distinction between a player and between someone like a caster or a game dev or an admin. Because caster or dev or admin, you can translate those skills to other games, to other more successful titles, and even other industries. I have translated some of the skills I learned from esports into my current job, right? That's a thing you can do. As a Smite player, what can you translate the skills as a player into? You can't translate it into really another game. Very few exceptions there. And even then, you're being asked to fully commit to Smite, so you're not going to be spending a lot of time committing to learning another game. Content creation, that is probably the biggest upside to committing to something as a professional player. You know, you see players like Ninja, Shroud, huge streamers now. But if it's content creation that is the potential upside to committing to this industry or to this esport, why would you not just do that out of the comfort of your own home? You can have your setup the way you want, you can achieve all the things you want, you can be comfortable in where you are rather than being in a foreign country having to focus on competing. If you want to make content creation your main deal, may as well do it out of the comfort of your own home. Then you look at other esports titles, like, okay, well, other esports players have a very successful life just being esports players. But that's not there for Smite, because there's basically two systems that are the successful ones in esports right now. There's the CSGO system, and then there's the developer run league system. The CSGO system, you have a lot of these tournaments, a lot of different opportunities to earn decent amounts of money throughout the year. You have tournaments all over the world. You know, probably the biggest esports title in the world right now in terms of sheer player volume. Then you have the developer run system. You have things like League of Legends, you have things like Rocket League, and to some extent you have Dota, where the major tournaments are Valve-sponsored tournaments, right? And at the end of those tournaments, at the end of their big tournaments, there is there's a literal pot of gold at the end of the rainbow in the case of the international. You have, you know, like $25, $26 million prize pools that make committing to this journey of being a professional player worth it, because you set yourself up for, you know, future life. You know, having $2 million in your bank account alongside your salary and stuff allows you to be very comfortable transitioning into later life, to transitioning post your playing career. With Smite, there isn't that. We were told there was going to be, what about Overwatch League? I'll get to Overwatch League in a second. But with League of Legends, with Dota and stuff like that, you have that massive cash. With Smite, you don't, right? You know, World's prize pool this year was not a lot of money. Was not a lot of money at all compared to some of these other esports. And so, you know, is it worth putting your entire life on hold, but putting your entire career, your relationships, your education on hold for, you know, this little amount of money? Because in the short term, it's a good deal. $30,000 minimum salary, all your housing taken care of, a lot of transportation taken care of, being able to live your passion. But what do you do afterwards? And I think that's where a lot of players are looking, is what do I do then potentially after Smite? There is nothing that I don't have any translatable skills to anything else. I don't have this opportunity to make a lot of money, to make myself comfortable, to make putting off life and education worth it. And I think, you know, if there is more announcements to come from Hi-Rez, I would really love to see one about, you know, helping players beyond their pro career, you know, help, you know, some kind of assistance with education maybe, or even just to boost the numbers in terms of the prize pools for their events. They only have 2 events now this year, Mid-Season Invitational and Worlds. And we had a little bit of crowdfunding this year. I don't want to go and talk about crowdfunding for Worlds this year and stuff because I don't know all the details, but the Worlds prize pool numbers that I've heard do not inspire me with a lot of confidence that players would be very happy with those numbers. So that's kind of, I think, that would be the biggest concern for me as a player moving to Alpha Reddit and committing. As I said, with caster, admin, developer, it's a bit different. But as a player, that is the scariest thought to me: is what do I do after Smite?
Yeah, I think those are really big questions because I think the 30,000 base salary, right, is great and all, and there are instances of teams making more than that. I don't want to say this to a large crowd, but I think SSG's salary is like out there and known, right? Like that's a thing people know about.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure
Right.
that it's been said on a few streams and stuff like that.
All right, so SSG makes about 60,000 in a year. Like that's insane.
Yeah.
You've got teams like there are some players I know. I won't I won't say anything about who they are, but I know from talking to them that they were making 45K. They negotiate that, and like I'm not talking about like middle of the road teams. Like there are between bottom and the top, there are opportunities for how you negotiate your contract depending on who your org is, and so I really like that, and that's a lot of money. It doesn't seem like it. We always like that benchmark of like the $60,000 a year job, right? Like that's really where you're making money. But in the 30,000, it's like that's scraping by. It's not though, especially moving forward. But it's not a life-changing amount of money a year, right? I think that's the really important part. And you focus on that with the Worlds, like why all of this mixer money, right? All of this is supposedly the best year for Smite ever. And the prize pool is just still weak. And, there's got to be a way to bump that up to get players excited.
Yep.
Because like you said, you look at what they're trying to do, and it feels very obvious as they're trying to copy and emulate League of Legends and what Overwatch is doing, as far as franchising, as far as the leagues go and everything like that. But with League of Legends specifically, right? The team houses is the future of Smite, if there is future for Smite, right? Like they're getting that down, they're making everything go to land through Atlanta, getting these teams houses. But Smite isn't there yet. Like we're not at that point where that infrastructure is in place, where the precedences are in place. We're just now getting to the point where everybody kind of understands coaches are important and are a thing, right?
Yeah.
Like competitively speaking, Smite esports is behind the curve. And then they're trying to rapidly catch up, right? They're trying to force all this stuff, and it just doesn't work like that unless there's like you're saying, unless there's other announcement coming, unless we have something big. We had the studios kind of break off Titan Forge, Evil Mojo, Heroic Leap, all that, and the idea being putted out there too was like it makes it easy to sell off assets, right? If there's maybe a potential buyer for Smite, I've kicked around like the pet theory of maybe Microsoft's coming in. Maybe that mixer partnership is going to turn into something a little more substantial. That would warrant all of this reset, all of this newness, right? Making everything nice and shiny and new. That would warrant that because you have Microsoft backing. You have that oomph, that backing now that really makes you legitimate and takes you to that next step. Not saying Smite isn't legitimate, but like as far as esports, I truly feel right now that Paladins is seen in a better light competitively than Smite is right now. That's just where we are. And so you look at this and you make this team house happen. Well, League of Legends has a team chef. They have nutritionists. They have like psychologists on set. They have a support staff. They have coaches. They have multiple coaches. They have analysts. These are all things. There's a giant, it's more akin to having a football team, like a professional football team where they have trainers.
Absolutely.
They have all of this support staff in place that makes it all work. I don't see the same being able to happen in Smite. JMac, I want to kind of get your thoughts on that. Do you think that maybe there's one team, maybe one team, maybe SSG? I can see them because they're willing to spend money. They're willing to do it right. I love what Unit and Shonduras have been done with their Smite team. They have grown that up very organically, and they've put a lot of work into that. I could see them going the coach route, the analyst route, really putting their all down in Atlanta. But outside of them, do you really think anybody else is going to dedicate to that?
I don't think that they're going to have quite the staff that something like the League of Legends will, where, like you said, a nutritionist, a fitness trainer as well, because they're going to be sitting down for a majority. They got to have some kind of fitness into that. Coaches, analysts. At the very best, with every team, I'm seeing the main roster, maybe a sub, and a coach for majority of them. And then outside of that, it's just going to kind of be up to them to kind of reach out as an extra and say, hey, can you look into this kind of stuff for us, so the people that they can't bring with them. I think it's another factor is we do have to remember that, they're probably not going to be in the biggest and nicest of houses in Atlanta. You can get something pretty nice for $40,000 a year, but the problem that you run into is you got to remember that some of these players will not have played together. Some of these players might be a little more hostile in such a small environment like that. And when a game goes bad, when you have bad matches in these high-level plays, sometimes you take those emotions with you back home. And when your home is with all 5 of those people and you're all just getting mad and upset with each other, you can have some pretty crazy stuff happen. And by not having someone there to be a mediator for that one, it could really hurt them. So I like the idea of it, but I just don't think that it's at that point yet to where doing so is the call. I think that instead of one big house for every team, dividing them up into maybe, a couple of apartment units per team or something like that, splitting them into 2s or 3s might be a better option for them, or, a small house like that, because 40,000 can get you quite a nice little living spot. I know at least in Texas, which is a little bit comparative to Alpharetta area, at least my part of Texas is fairly similar in cost of living. It's about 12,000 or so a year for living out here for even just like a 1-bedroom apartment like that. And it goes up just a little bit more and more. So if you're looking at, let's say, $15,000 for a 2 or 3-bedroom apartment, you divide that up in half and you've got extra money to throw in for, an extra, like a bigger 3-bedroom area or something like that. So I think that trying to get them all into one place may not be the call right now. Maybe, after the first year of testing and they get a little bit more funding for it. But I just think where it's at right now, it's not the safest of ideas.
Going back to what I was saying. Oh, Hughes, you wanna step in right there?
Sorry, just quickly. I wanna say with even League of Legends, even Oceanic teams, there is an Oceanic team here in Australia, and it's the most successful team, no surprise, because they have the funding behind them and they have the commitment where their practice facility is not where they live. They practice in a stadium here in the Sydney Cricket Ground. They have an esports high performance center. They train with the same people that train professional football teams here. They have sports psychologists. They have the nutritionists. They have multiple coaches. They have an academy team where they train future players up through. They have that behind them, and that's a team in Australia, not even over in North America or Europe. It's even in Australia, League of Legends has that level of infrastructure, and we can't achieve that yet in Smite. So yeah, I fully agree with your points.
What I was gonna say. So first off, somebody from Space Station reached out to me and corrected me. Nobody in the Smite scene made 60K. Space Station did make the highest, I believe they said, but it was shy of that 60K. More in line, with, I think all the salaries were about 30 to about mid 50 or something around there, 30 to 50K or something like that, based on the team. So I wanted to make that correction because they did reach out to me. So I figured I owed it to everybody to say that. But what I was going to say is going back to what I was saying with them trying to catch up, right? So they're trying to catch up with everything else. They're rushing all this through. What this really feels like to me, and how the reason I have reservations and problems with this is because we haven't had any of those other announcements that we're looking for. If we get any of these other announcements that we want, it changes the ball game. It changes the context and the air around it. But what it feels like to me is that we're being forced into this sink or swim scenario for Smite competitive, for Smite esports. Season 3 Worlds came out of nowhere, surprised everybody. Season 3 single-handedly added time to the game, right? It added life and longevity, and it's why we're able to be where we are right now. Season 4 didn't feel like it really did anything, right? It was there, it happened, but it wasn't crazy, it wasn't super good, it wasn't super bad. So season 5 there was a lot of pressure on it, right, to do really good things. I made a tweet out that said, if we don't, if viewership is anything less than 100K, season 5 is going to be looked at like a failure as far as competitive goes, because the viewership's not there, right? We didn't hit that 100K mark.
I don't think we even hit half
unless
that,
we hit it with, I don't have access to like Asian viewing numbers because of, the different platforms and stuff. But even if you combined Mixer, Twitch, all of the other people, so not even just the official Twitch channel, but other like DM Brandon streaming it, everybody like that, added Facebook, added Twitter, YouTube, we didn't hit that mark. And so all of that is there. And if slow growth, if we do slow increments and everything, it feels like we're assured another at least 2 seasons, right? But it feels like we're being put in this point like, no, screw it. Sink or swim time. We're going to force it to we either are solidified, we're never going anywhere, or our time with Smite Esports is done. Like it's a really awkward thing. And maybe you guys disagree with me. Maybe I'm looking at it too black and white. Maybe I'm a little bit cynical. JMac, I've been going to HughZ first on all of these, but I'll go to you. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think that this is too rushed, or do you think this is like this all makes sense and we're all being I'm overreacting?
I think some kind of change did need to happen. I think that this may have been a little drastic of an adjustment, but I think that something needed to happen because it's been the same pretty much stagnant format for the last 5 years of Smite, where we play a split, we have a LAN. It doesn't matter. We play another split. Hey, this LAN kind of matters, but not really. And then, hey, now we're into the fall season, and now all of a sudden everything matters. Everything you did in the first 2 splits, garbage. What does it even matter? Oh, cool. Yeah, you went to Valencia. You won Valencia. That doesn't do anything because, hey, you didn't make it to Worlds this time. Who cares how you performed last split? I think a change like the season format here was definitely a necessary adjustment to increase the competitive integrity of the game, because now it does matter. Every single game you play now has a point where it matters. Because we see a team like Splice, where at the start of the season, they were garbage. They were the bottom SPL team, and then they were the 5th place SPL team in their region. And all of a sudden, now they're the world champions in the one split that it mattered. You could essentially erase everything from existence from what happened before fall, and it doesn't matter. But that's how the story is built through. And I think by having that story of, 8 months ago, these were the worst players in the league as far as, their score lines went. They may not mechanically be or whatnot be the worst players. But, that was that story of they were the worst, but now they're the world champions. And I think that by adjusting this format to being so is necessary. I think that the LAN switch to it might be a little bit drastic on that. But I think that also one thing that HughZ mentioned that isn't being talked about is now the best of 5s for every set that they're playing. That is massive because in seasons past, it was best of 3s. And then they went to the 2-game sets, which were, well, as long as you win 1 game, you're okay. If you lose your second one, you're screwed. Otherwise, it just kind of goes through. So going into this best of 5 is going to obviously it's going to make for longer sets. And, instead of casting, maybe 4 sets a day like they were doing or whatnot, now they're only doing 2 sets of those a day. But it's not requiring all these players to gather into one place at one single time, because I don't know if you've had a chance, Zach, to actually see the new Seal Shot area, like their new studio that they built up for. I don't know if you've had a chance to walk through it and kind of see what it's all about, but there's not a lot of room in there. They have 4 playing areas, but when they're running 2 LANs at the same time, it gets very crowded in there, because you're going to have your 2 teams that are playing for Smite, and then next door is your 2 teams for Paladins. And then you have 4 practice stations, which 2 of them are going to be Smite and 2 are going to be Paladins there. And so at no time do you need any more than 4 teams, but then you have to have the other 4 teams here for whenever they're going up to play. It kind of crowds this area around here. So I think that by adjusting these sets, yeah, it's going to be like, oh man, now this could go 5 games in one set. That's really intense. That's really awesome. But now we don't have to worry about having 8 teams in the studio at a single time. We can let these guys have their break for the day, have these guys come here. So while the LAN is extreme, I think that the format change was 100% necessary to see growth in the scene.
HughZ?
Yeah, I agree. I like the format change a lot. I'm still mixed on the best of 5s, because some of the hype about LAN is being able to see how teams perform in best of fives. We don't necessarily know how they perform in those scenarios otherwise, but obviously it's always great to see more Smite. So I'm mixed on that. I do love the season-long results mattering for getting to Worlds. RIP Dignitas from last year, as you said, you used them as the example for Valencia and stuff like that. Yeah, Biggie's coming after you for that one, JMac. But this kind of leads me into my next and final negative point. This is my last point about negativity about Season 6, is that as you said, we're kind of being forced into this sink or swim scenario. We're being forced to, step it up and play with the big boys in terms of how we do Smite. We've been forced to be the Overwatch League, essentially. And it seems like it's the model that Hires is copying. I mean, I think even Todd Harris said, we're like the Overwatch League does. This is what we're doing. But the thing about the Overwatch League is that their setup is a temporary setup. They're just using this until they can get each team established in their own city, using their own city as their home ground and things like that. So the Overwatch League system is not something that we should be looking at as a system to copy long term. And even Overwatch League itself is not something we should be looking to copy because, I mean, the Overwatch League isn't good. Like, viewership has dropped drastically in the Overwatch League. Hype has dropped drastically in the Overwatch League. At the start of the year when Overwatch League was going on, everyone was talking about it. Everyone loved it. No one talks about it anymore. Like, even in the last season, even in the season 1 finals or whatever they called it, no one was talking about it. No one really cared that much. And the Overwatch World Cup was pretty cool, but that's a different story. Again, that's a World Cup. And it's like, I don't know. It's just like it just doesn't feel like a good system. Like their very first playoff series or whatever they had, I forget how they did it because they had like a season that was divided up into 4 splits. Their first split finals, right, was the day after their last regular season match, and that was not exciting at all. They copped a lot of Christmas for it, and they changed it to be like 2 days afterwards or something. And it's like there's no excitement there for that Overwatch League system. And I think that's going to happen a little bit here with Smite. Is that we're going to have all these teams playing all the time on LAN against each other, no regions, right? And that's going to lead to some good stuff. But the bad stuff it's going to lead to is that there's no speculation or theorizing or analyzing coming into LANs about, who's going to be the actual good teams. Like, if all the teams are played together on LAN all the time, all through the year, we would see, come the end of the year, like, it's pretty clear who the best teams are. And that makes the LANs a little bit less exciting. If we have all this speculation that we did this year about, can NA match up with EU, that makes Splice's victory that much better because all year, NA had been bodied by EU. EU won the previous 2 LANs before that. They didn't drop a set to NA in those previous 2 LANs. It's like, that is exciting to watch people overcome those international hurdles. And you don't get that same speculation if everyone's playing in the same region. I think we should be looking more towards the Riot system, and I think what you guys said about this move being too fast is absolutely true. Because I think if we had more time to develop this move, maybe there would have been time to set up an EU studio, which I know has been the big kind of rallying cry for EU players, and it's something that myself and a lot of other people have asked for a long time. Is an EU studio for people in EU to play out of, and for people from EU to go watch from, because if you're taking all the other international scenes out of the equation, EU is a massive, massive scene for Smite, and they get just as dicks over as the international scenes do, because we didn't have a LAN there this year. Last year we had Valencia, we had a LAN at a DreamHack there. This year we had nothing. It's so hard being a fan of Smite from EU because you have these great teams you want to support that do well, but when can you go see them? The only time you could go see them is basically this year was one event. You could go and see them at DreamHack Atlanta this year. And that sucks. And that really sucks this year, next year going forward, when all the teams are going to be over there all the time. You can't even talk to your favorite players at the right time. You can't get into games with your favorite players. How many people do you see tweeting out like, oh, I got in a game with Anister and I did really well. And Anister gives them a like and a retweet and stuff like that. That stuff is great for fans. And EU is being completely cut off from that. Unless teams decide to travel over. But as a majority of players said, traveling over is a really bad option. So I think we lose a lot of stuff by having teams going over to Atlanta. We lose the speculation of we lose the interregion rivalry, which is a really cool rivalry to have, and it's always really great to see who's on top, EU and NA. And the fact, I think it's a little bit underrated that NA has won the last 2 worlds, and I think that's pretty cool. You're missing out on a lot of extra stuff that people being from different regions bring. You lose a lot of that mystery and speculation about who's actually a good team. Like going into this world, everyone was saying like United ran the 4 split in NA, but how good actually are they? How can they match up with an EU team? And then for EU teams, you had like, sorry, Big Eve, you're still in chat, but it's like Dignitas, how well can they match up against NA teams? Will they perform badly on LAN again? Energy being able to, it's like they lost Yaman and they had to go through all those hurdles to pick up Homie FA. It made such a great storyline for them. And it's like you lose a lot of the extra juice and flavor from Smite competitive esports when you have kind of the everything being all together all at once, all run out of the same place, all the same, all the time. I'm worried that it'll become stale like the Overwatch League.
I think one of the under talked about points as a whole is the degradation of EU as a region if all the top players move out, right? Because like nobody is going to travel. That is just not going to happen because you're going to lose out on scrims. You're not going to be like how are you going to scrim the other teams in the league if you're in EU, right? That's just not going to work. It's not going to happen. Then on top of that, having ranked, EU ranked is basically dead, right? How do you have an EU ranked without the top players? How do new players get discovered in EU ranked now when all the pros are gone? Like there's so many little things like that. Like how do you reconcile this move and then also expect new players to be discovered? How do you get Lasbra? Lasbra's a perfect example. How long has he been a ranked monster, right? He's been there forever, and then finally getting his shot through the SML and everything like that, putting that together, and now he's looking at a big fat SPL opportunity. If he doesn't make SPL, I'm going to be mad. Like he deserves it at this point. And so how do you get that anymore? How do you get your fine OKs? How do you get all of these guys into the league now from EU when that whole system is now no longer in place effectively, right? Like that's, I don't know. Do you guys have any answer for that? Like, I feel like that's one of the points Hi-Rez has not been able to walk back or address or anything.
So it was supposedly that since the SML is still there in EU, there's the possibility of players still being able to get in the SML, but there's no relegations for SML. There's a more solid commitments and stuff. So it is that much harder for an EU player to make the transition from ranked monster into semi-professional and even professional play. And you got to think about it as well. Even SML players are going to have a hard time being called up to the big leagues. Like how. It's that much more expensive for an organization to bring an SML player over from Europe than it is to bring one in from NA. Like when you've got one in your back garden, it makes it that much more difficult for the next generation of talent from every region other than North America to come through, which is, it's not good. It's bad for all the other regions, but more importantly as well, it's not healthy for the growth of Smite competitive esports.
Yeah, I think that's a big, like, as a whole, the growth of Smite competitive esports. Like all of these changes have to work flawlessly, perfectly in sync with one another this year. Like it's got to hit the ground running, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, JMac.
Yeah, I think that's the big point is the SML into SPL, because one thing we have to talk about with Trifecta is Sam and Paul were playing in the minor league at the start of this year, and all of a sudden they're now, third place team at Worlds. I mean, that's something that's going to be so much more difficult, especially for the EU side of things whenever this whole transition happens, because all those EU players, they're going to be on, they're going to be stateside. Now they're not going to have those players up in the ranked matches, being able to do those European time ranked in-house, or the European in-houses. They're going to be playing on NA to EU ping if they even attempt to do so at crazy hours of the day. So it's going to be really tough to see any kind of team changes that are going to happen throughout the season. That's not just going to be, well, if this EU or NA player doesn't work out, we're just going to replace them with another NA player because they're right here. It's only going to cost us, $500 to fly this guy over here or whatever, get him and get the other guy out of here kind of thing, versus, this amount of money to fly this guy in and get all of his stuff back home and deal with all of his visas and everything like that. And okay, well, now we got to get a visa for this EU player to come over here versus, just telling this NA guy to drive a couple hours to have a home down here, and it's just going to be, and that's one of the stories that really makes it so big is these SML players coming up into the SPL during the season, replacing the veterans who we all know and love. And then all of a sudden, these rookies are doing pretty damn well for themselves. I mean, we got to see Paul go off on the SSG team, even though it was just a seeding match. That's a side of Paul that we haven't seen in the SPL. That's what we got to see out of SML Paul, and then he got to do it in the SPL. And it's going to be so much harder to see that as we move on into this next season.
Yeah, and one of the other things, though, like, we haven't even touched it. I saw Papa Lob mention this, but like, when going down there, your computer, your setup, all of that, how do you get it over here? Do you ship it? That's risking all sorts of damage to that, right? And then do you expect your org to then provide computers for everybody? Like, it's such a weird line or walk there, because like, on one hand, like, oh yeah, of course those orgs are just going to provide computers. Like, that's just what's going to happen. Like, they all have those partnerships, but at the same time, it's like, well, can they do they? Like, it's a big commitment and everything. Like, it's expensive. And can they do that? Will they do that? It's hard to say, right? And then somebody, Shady Meeks in chat, asked, like, what about another combine to help with the EU player discovery? And having the combine is good and all, but realistically, like in an ideal world, all of that works, right? But realistically, again, if Johnny can't find a way into the SPL, combine's not going to help either, right? It doesn't mean anything to pro players. It doesn't mean anything to SML players that you did well in a combine. They're not able to see you with ranked. They're not able to queue with you a bunch like that. Like that's what really matters. You might get noticed at a combine. Oh, this kid did really well. Well, I hope he has a good day. I hope he has fun, because like, we're all in NA. He's in EU. I can't queue with him. I don't know what's going on. I have to rely on all these other people. And then it becomes that weird, is like that fake #1 seed, like that fake #1 player. It's like, well, how good are they then if they're in the top EU ranked player, but none of the SPL players are there to help like cull people, right? Like, it's a whole lot of like really questionable stuff, especially for EU. And it's just, if they were to do an EU studio, that would feel so much better. It feels like killing the rivalry between NA and EU feels like such a big blow. Like, the NA EU rivalry across all esports is a thing. Region rivalries are a huge part of any sport and esports. Competition thrives on those rivalries.
Absolutely. And to look at League of Legends again, right? They still have the NAE rivalry. They don't have region restrictions on where their players can come from. Their players come from all over the world, but there's still that inter-region rivalry. And so to reopen the EU side of things and have teams in EU that can come from anywhere, that would be sick. That would be absolutely awesome. I think everyone would have been so hyped about that.
When I first read the announcement, that's what I thought it was. I thought they were just removing region locks and it was still NAEU.
Yeah.
Like, I just kind of, I didn't really read it closely. It's like, oh, that's amazing. Like, that's like going into season 5, that was kind of like one of the things that was low key, like that could happen. Like, I think there was one point where like before everything kind of got cemented, I think Aurora was looking at joining an EU team or something like that. It was like, it was really weird rumor going around. And so I was like really hyped that they were going to do this. And I'm still hyped that we're going to get mixed region teams. But the fact that like we're taking out the aspect of them being in AEU and then only playing against each other. It's like, you look at NBA or the NFL, the Patriots and the Packers don't play each other every year. They don't play each other unless it makes the playoffs, stuff like that. Like, that's a thing, and that makes those games more hype. Like, Brady and Rodgers are two of the best QBs, but you don't see them play against each other. Like, that adds that level of hype when they do finally play against each other. When you see players and teams play against each other all year, it kind of takes away some of the magic and the mystery around it. And I really wish we could still have that type of rivalry, or even if they, like, it's kind of like a half measure. If they do like a division, they divide the teams in 4, right? Or 5. They divide 5 and 5, and then they only play at LANs. We talk about CSGO and League of Legends. Both of even League of Legends has more events a year than what Smite does. And that's what really makes that work a lot more. I've been saying this for, I think everybody's kind of been saying this for a while now, is more events, more show matches, whatever you got to do, more invitational stuff. Like that's a really how you need to start growing the Smite scene internationally and everything. Dream hacks have been a great thing. I mean, I know it's more expensive to travel and everything, set all that up, but exposing more of the world and having more hype events is really, I think, would have been the better answer here.
Yeah. I just want to answer a question or a comment in chat. Calto, I hope I'm saying your name right. It's my opinion, unpopular opinion, but I love the idea of no region lock. The rivalry for me, but being able to see a team that has basket and adapting, for example, is way too high. I agree. Removing the region lock is good. There never should have been a region lock in the first place. Region lock was one of the stupidest things in all of Smite, but it was put in place because players would only try and bring their friends on and weren't taking shit seriously. So I understand why they did it. Should have been removed a long time ago. I love the fact that region lock is gone, but I still want there to be regions, because having just one, like every sport and esport other than Overwatch League, right? I'm taking Overwatch League out because I don't think Overwatch League is a good example. I don't think it's a good esport. But all the other successful esports and sports, you have divisions, you have conferences, you have rivalries. If you look at the biggest sport in the world, you look at football or soccer, as what you Americans call it, you have, the English Premier League, huge amount of teams in there, but then you also have leagues under it, which are like equivalent to Challenge Cup or Minor League. But then you also have different countries have their own leagues, and then you have the bigger tournament over up all of that, which is the UEFA Championship, where you have your representatives from each of the regions going against each other, and that's so exciting to watch. You need to see Manchester United play against Paris Saint-Germain or Bayern Munich and stuff like that. Those are really cool games to watch because you don't get to see those teams play together every single week. You look at CSGO, every region has got its own locally run tournaments, and then there's the big major events where those regions come against each other and clash. EU versus NA was huge there for a while. Can the NA team ever win a major? Last year, or maybe it was actually even this year, Cloud9 answered that question and said yes, they can. We had a Brazilian superstar team come through in old LGSK, now MIBR. League of Legends, you have non-region locked teams, non-region lock players, but you still have those individual regions, and it's crazy to see. We had a Chinese team win Worlds after a Korean team had always won it in the last couple of years. You had EU and NA teams perform really well. So those having the regions adds more excitement to the game. It adds more possibility to the game. It adds more potential slots for players to be involved. And as you said, Zach, it creates more opportunities for Smite and Smite esports to be exposed to different parts of the world. And so I think they're really shoehorning themselves into a really tight spot here with a really specific market. And as you said, it has to all execute flawlessly for it to be actually pulled off. And that's where I think a lot of other concerns in as well. And this is my final minor negative point, is that one thing that I think players are taking into account, and I know I take into account when reading the Season 6 announcement, is that HughZ doesn't have the best reputation in the world for making things work, and even just as a company for their business decisions. Like Realm Royale, Bot Smashers, Smite Tactics, Hand of the Gods, Global Agenda, and then a lot of issues to do with staff and personalities in that company. There are question marks around HughZ as a company, as there are with most other gaming and esports companies as well. HughZ is not unique in that regard, but it does add that extra level of uncertainty when you want to try and commit your life to a company that, its reputation isn't sterling.
Yeah, I think it was really important to see, like I said, like Worlds is the bastion of like what brings the Smite community together at large, right? It's what, like, you see all of the love and everything. It just comes together, and HughZ gets it gets its goodwill views and everything like that. But how quickly all of that just dissipated because of the way this announcement was handled. I think that's important, that how quickly that goodwill. HughZ, I think all three of us have been on the other side of seeing the cogs work for HughZ, right? We've talked to them of how decisions are made, everything like that. We've seen good handling. We've seen really bad handling. There's a theme within HughZ of, sometimes even though the goodwill decision is right in front of them, it doesn't happen. We don't see that actually manifest. And it's for, many reasons that, HiRes doesn't just do things just to do things, or they just to not do them, right? There's always a reason, there's always something. But it always feels like you look at HiRes and it's just like, man, if this company just had just a scooch in a different direction, just a little bit different management style somewhere, like, wow, what could have been? Well, wow, where could this go?
Yeah.
And like, there's always in my like Smite is such an amazing game. HiRes is such an amazing community, and like, there's so much passion and love within the community, within the company, and everything like that. That like, it's they let you down in certain ways, but then you're like, but they could do it. Like they always that lingering thought in the back of your head, like, they can turn around, they could really make this work. What they have is amazing. And they just haven't been able to do it. And it's I think HughZ, like, to quote you from the beginning, you're like, you weren't mad when SGS got discontinued, you were disappointed. And I feel like that's that's HiRes. That's like, we all get to that point, like, we burning out on Smite, burning out with HiRes titles, and you either find your love again, something else happens, or we have lost a lot of people in the community and Smite as a whole because of stuff like that. I want to see more of the second day. I want to see more of today, where they're reaching out, where they're trying to plan stuff. They're working hand in hand. I think another underrated thing, I think we're going to talk about positives now with HiRes. Yes. The transparency coming out of that video with Todd was amazing, and it needs to continue. Hands down, HiRes has been the lack of transparency with HiRes, the lack of willingness to sit down and talk to the fans. I want to see them do more just talking to us about decisions, about things that are going on, be very transparent. We can handle it. The community at large has matured to the point where you can have real conversations about real decisions and everything with us. You can tell us why things are happening. That has been something that's been severely lacking. It's why Overwatch is as big as it is. Those developer talks. It's why Fortnite is as big as it is. Epic is very transparent in what they're doing. They're talking to you. It's something that Smite has needed for a while, and watching that Todd video has shown me that when their back is against the wall, they're willing to do the transparency option. And I think they need to learn from this, because right after that video, there was a giant shift in mood and opinion around season 6.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And it's kind of the HiRes, it's the classic HiRes 1-2 punch. They hit you with the king hit out of nowhere of, we're making this massive decision, we're changing all these things, and screw you, we're going to do it no matter what you say. Like with the SGS and SML changes earlier this year, they were like, screw you all, we're going to best of ones, blah blah, all these decisions. And then they hit you with the second punch, which is the one to pacify you, where they're like, okay, look, we stuffed up, here are these changes we're going to do. And it's like, if they just learnt to not do the first punch, if they learnt to not do that first step, and to listen to the community and the players in the first place, because they eventually listen to them, but only after they've gotten all this bad will from the community and from the players in general. And so if they just learnt to listen in the first place and not do all this idiotic stuff that earns them so much bad will and mistrust, and like, oh, classic HiRes, there's another classic HiRes move. It's like, if they just didn't do that in the first place, it would be so much better off, because they eventually get to a good point, but it takes them so long and loses them so much trust and goodwill along the way that a lot of times it does more harm than good. And this announcement was similar. Like, came out swinging at the start about all these season 6 changes. We're going to do it, and screw you. If you don't get it, you're not committed enough, things like that. And everyone's like, well, screw you, we just won't play your game anymore. And then they're kind of like, okay, well, like, here's actually some more information. Here's actually, some things we're thinking about. Here's some changes to the international system. We will provide some support. And it's like, just be like that from the start. You can, it's like you said, Zach, like, if they were just a scooch different in like a direction, it's like they it could be so much more. It could be so much better. It could be so much, everyone could be so much happier. Everything like that, and it's like it's so frustrating to see. It's like a parent with a child that you know that they're brilliant, you know that they're smart, but they just won't damn open a textbook. They just won't damn study. They always want to go out with their friends and party and drink and stuff, and they could be a doctor, but instead they're, stuffing around. And it's like, you just like, God damn it. Frustration is the word to describe high-res.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. JMac, do you have anything you want to add kind of on top of that with, the positive? We want to focus on that. We definitely, we really hammered down on those negatives, but what are the biggest positives that you really see for season 6 moving forward?
For me, I kind of highlighted earlier with the competitiveness of season 6 is kind of the big upside out of all of this is they can now have better games. They're going to matter more. They're going to actually have depth and meaning behind every single game that they play now. There's going to be, this is kind of one thing that I talked with a lot of the other casters, because as a caster, one of your, the main job that everybody sees is you yell about the game. You talk about the game as it's going on. But one of the things that high-res in particular, and the thing that we all try and do, especially myself of the Smite scene, is we try and take these players beyond just the name on the screen. We go beyond saying, this is Barracuda. He's a hunter for Space Station Gaming, and he's been playing this game for 5-6 years. If we just went on there and said that, there wouldn't be any meaning behind it. It's just, okay, it's just this guy named Barracuda. But as the casters, by having all these players here more often, they're able to do more content with these players. They're able to get those faces out there, get more stories for them. And who knows, we might see more stuff like what Spiff Sinister put out back with Jeff and Barra previously. We might start seeing more of those videos. With what Obey, I think Obey was working on something, or Space Station. Somebody was working on something just recently. I think it was Obey, because they're having their whole shutdown thing. But, if the casters and the players weren't as good of friends as they are because of, the nature of how all of the competitiveness and how their stories are handled, it wouldn't be as successful. So I think by them bringing this competitive side, while yes, it is the drastic shift forward, by bringing it here, we now get to have more depth to our players. We get to have big stories. Yes, we're losing the EU versus NA rivalry kind of thing that we all love to talk about, but now we get to build up these new things of, okay, so, we might get to see Baskin versus this guy at Worlds, but now we're actually going to see it multiple times throughout the season. We get to see this, this change, this interaction here. And I think that that's one of the big things moving forward is the competitiveness is much stronger and there's a lot bigger depth to it. And then there's also the content creation portion after. We kind of talked about how, what happens after Smite, if Smite's done and they're done, what can they do beyond there? But I think in general, this is going to bring a lot more publicity to the players and actually bring them out of just the screen, because there's even some players now that we still only associate them, as much fun as it is to say the Smite Paul League and the Sam Paul League. These guys are actual players. They're actual people. And we got to have that story and topic going on for them. So I think that for me is the biggest highlight coming on, is a better competitive aspect to the scene, and better stories can now be created for these players.
Yeah, having everybody kind of located in the same place. I expect a lot, really, from content creation. I mean, season 5 content creation clause was a bit of a wash, I felt like, right? Some people really did it, really adapted it, but others, you didn't see much of a needle move, right? And that's fine. I want it to be on the orgs. I want the orgs to do much. The players can stream and all that, right? But the orgs are really the ones who have to step it up. What is Dignitas doing? Everybody should be doing that. Rival, anything that Cincy touches, right? That's what everybody should be doing, realistically. And now that we're all going to be down in Atlanta, everybody can really focus on content. There's a lot more. Even just as a whole, more stuff. I want more lands, more events. Use the Skillshot Studio to its fullest. Like, I don't know, the invitational, we're gonna have the Splice invitational, right? Like, I love that every year. Like, I look forward to that stuff all the time. I want to see more like that if you can, right?
Yeah.
And if they're gonna be down there, just pick a weekend. Like, all right, we're gonna do some really cool, fun stuff. Like, utilize the cast, the crew you have, make content as far as orgs go. Let the orgs like rent out the studio if they want to make content there, right? If there's nothing else going on, let them rent it out for something. There's so much you can do, and I'm looking forward to them really taking that by the horns. And you know, I want it to be good, and like, I know we said we were done with the negative, but you look at, you know, there were some tweets and stuff floating around after Worlds about how bad the communication was with HighRes, how content was planned, and then people didn't show up and things like that. Like, there was a lot of negative stuff that happened as far as content goes. Just make it happen, right? Like we said, just earn that goodwill by following through. This is Smite's, this is HighRes's chance. Season 6 really can be the point where Smite just takes off. It grows. It establishes itself firmly. Like, it really is such a shame to me to think Paladins has risen above Smite as far as like competitive respect, right? Smite has become a meme in a lot of competitive circles, right? And I want to see it get the respects that it deserves. And we can't do that unless changes are made. And these changes definitely could be the step in that right direction, but it's the execution on top of that that really needs to be on point. And I don't know. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, on top of my list of talking points of the positives is content is going to be great, right? And I definitely agree with you guys that the orgs need to step up more in terms of the content they're putting out there, because org-based content is really good because it exposes the players to a wider audience, right? It exposes the players to more fans that aren't native to the Smite scene, and just more content overall is good for the scene. I really miss reading some of the articles that the HighRes staff would put out, and I even wrote a few about OCE and stuff like that. And I miss reading those articles about competitive stuff. And understandably, the casters have got a lot to do. They've got a lot of stuff to cast. It's difficult to then find time in between that to do other stuff. But I miss that content, and you get to, with the better competition, with better games, and with more content around that, exposing personalities more, it creates that possibility of exposing Smite to a wider audience. I think, though, one of the first steps that has to come in there is they have to improve the viewing experience for Smite, because it's not great at the moment. When I sit there and watch some competitive Smite, it's not great. If they can improve that, fix up Spectator a little bit in terms of how it looks. I know there's been a lot of bug fixes and stuff this year, but I think the actual look of Spectator needs to change, because it's not great. And I always ask for more org branding to be in there, because I think that's really cool and a really good way to get orgs invested and to get other fans invested. Like, oh, look, there's the Dignitas logo. That's the team I like. It makes me more committed to watching the game. In previous years, up in the top of the scoreboard, you have the org logo and name up in the top, but now it's just the org name typed into the in-game spectator, and that's not great. But if they can do that, as you said, if they can execute on making a better viewing experience, making better content, making the competition closer, the more people expose to Smite, and because this year Smite will be exposed more, with some orgs leaving and new orgs coming in, with it all being on LAN, with a lot of support from outside, there will be more exposure. But we have to make sure, or HighRes/Skillshot have to make sure that exposure is good exposure, is bringing people into a positive viewing experience, is bringing people into good games to watch, is bringing them into good commentary to listen to, and everything like that. And so if they can pull that off, it'll be great. It'll be fantastic. We'll see more people coming into Smite than ever before. But it just has to be executed right. But I am really excited to see some of the content that HighRes/Skillshot puts out around these players, because we don't see a lot of it. And some of it could be better. But now the fact that you have all these players here, you have him here on such a long basis. Hell, think about the spring fling. You have all these players here now. You don't just have to bring in Jeff Barrow every time. You can bring in all these players. You can do big events with all these players that are living in the area. All that stuff like that, and the positivity that has on the community and on the wider esports community could be fantastic for Smite. And I really, really hope they can pull it off.
Absolutely. All right. So I think that's about all the time we have for today.
Yeah.
We were initially going to talk about DreamHack and everything like that, but I think we've gone on too long with the season 6 stuff there, because there genuinely was a lot to cover. And, you know, between it being a 3-man setup tonight and just HughZ being a wealth of knowledge, we just had a lot to say and a lot to talk about. So I don't think we're going to be able to cover DreamHack tonight. We will save that for next week. Let JMac get some sleep here. He looks like he's a little tired.
I got about 2 hours of sleep last night. It was a long and sleepless night for me. Juno was not feeling too well, so I had to stay up with her most of the night.
It's not good.
All right. So we're gonna let JMac go tend to his pup and tend to himself and get some sleep. But before we go, thank you everybody for watching. This has probably been one of our better shows as far as viewership comes out. You know, HughZ getting the OCE guys in, you know, bringing that little bit of legitimacy. You know, JMac the being on stage, right? Like we are 3 legitimate Smite people. Well, 2.5. Like I former legitimate Smite person, whatever you want to qualify myself as. But
you've been there. You were on the desk. You count.
Yeah. You're the third place coach in ACE.
I'm third place in ACE coach. Hey, there we go.
Look, at least your team didn't have to deal with a 45-minute Loki game on stage.
Ooh. Yeah, like, so JMac, I want to tell you this. I offered to coach Carlton after they beat us because they were going to lose because they only had the one strategy. And they said, no, we already have a coach. Thanks. And then I was like, oh, man, you're going to get eaten alive by Meerkat. And then they got eaten alive by Meerkat. So that was fun.
Game 1, at least. Game 2 was like the Berg show.
Yeah, Berg just popped off. I really liked watching the NAC. I would love to see, you know, NACE get a little bit more stuff going in next year. I would love that. I would love to see the play versus like the high school stuff. There's so much opportunity with Smite going in this next year. And like the horizon is so bright. There's so many options. Just please do them all, Hi-Rez. Just do them. And I guarantee you, like, we can make, if season 5 was the best year of Smite, season 6 can blow it out of the water. I know it can. So HughZ, thanks for coming on. Is there anything else you want to do or say, shout outs you want to give? I know you want to give some love to Biggie. I know that's what the first thing you're gonna do.
Yeah, shout outs to my life partner and soulmate Biggie, coach of Team Dignitas. Always support me in everything I do. Cross continental as well. Love him. Shout outs to all my OCE people that showed up in chat and contributed as well. You know, as you can see, OCE has got a lot to contribute to Smite, and I'm glad that we showed that today. You know, shout outs to Hi-Rez for actually giving me chances before in the past and giving me a platform to expound my crazy theories and opinions from. And shout outs to you guys for having me on.
Absolutely. You know, you were definitely a guy that I've been targeting for a while now. You know, I've been in those DMs forever. You know, I just based on today, I was right. You and I have some pretty good synergy. I would, if we didn't have time constraints, I shudder. I fear to think how long you and I could just sit here and talk for. It'd be a long time.
We'd lose at least a day. We'd lose at least 24 hours.
All right. And you know, I really do want to highlight JMac. I really want to give him a shout out here. And I like the work that you did, casting I really want to focus on that cast for the NACE game, because it truly was amazing. And the progress that you have made. I remember watching you last year at the AVGL when you were casting with Tolly, and watching you stare straight ahead, locked like the most tense human being I've ever seen in my life. And just like, you were good, but like you were just like, I don't know, the nerves or whatever. And then comparing that to today, today where you casted, you know, the NACE, the change is mind-blowing. How much you've grown. Like, I know you and I haven't been the closest of friends, the last year or so, but like I followed you, watched you guys. I was there when you first joined Freight Train's casting crew, right? I've kind of seen you grow from that point on, and it really does make me like I proud, I guess, even though like I'm not responsible for it. Like, but watching you grow and being part of that friend group, it's really just nice to see you do it. And then absolutely killing it on the desk. It was I loved the fact that all of the stuff that we had talked about was like helping you and everything. And it just really made me feel good to see you do so well. And I really hope you get some more opportunities. And I know a lot of people feel the same way. I was in chat watching, and you got a lot of love out there. So I really hope that you get some more opportunities like that. Hi-Rez would be fools not to give you some more opportunities like that. So I really just wanted to take that time and really shout you out, because you did a hell of a job. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Big shout outs to JMac, big shout outs to HughZ. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys on the Battleground next week. Goodbye, everybody.